Please welcome Laurie Fabiano.
Hi. Good morning. There are so many people to thank who helped make this summit happen, but there's really only one without whom none of us would be here, and that's Tory. And I told her she couldn't thank anybody, but I'm going to thank her. Thank you, Tory, for making today's event possible, and especially for making the Tory Burch Foundation part of your business plan 14 years ago. Today, business leaders strive to lead with purpose, which is fantastic, but it's not something Tory needs to strive for. That's how she built her business, because it is who she is as a person, a woman with enormous vision, empathy, and tenacity. For these reasons and more, she is definitely one of my heroes. We're here today to talk about how unconscious bias and stereotypes impact women's equality. Many moons ago, when I was in high school, a teacher made a sexist comment and I complained to him. He asked, "Don't you believe in roles?" Smart aleck that I was, I answered, "Rolls are great, especially with lots of butter." What I didn't realize then was that even after the women's movement had won hearts and minds, after all, most people today really do believe men and women are equal, that we still wouldn't have equality 40 years later. This, I believe strongly, is the impact of unconscious bias. Until we deal with the outmoded behaviors and the mindsets and stereotypes that are part of our culture, we will never have a level playing field in our workplaces or in life. Yes, we need better systems and laws to achieve women's equality and advance human rights. But to be truly successful, we must change the culture starting from childhood and create new norms. You may be surprised at the extent of how much we have subliminally absorbed biases. We internalize ideas from our socialization. If we hear something, see something, do something over and over again, it becomes the norm. Here's an example. A recent study showed that when people were asked to draw a leader, the vast majority of people, both men and women, drew a man. The shortcuts in our brains are programmed to typecast people. How often do we catch ourselves, or not, when we label a crime boy as weak, a blonde as an airhead, an Italian guy as a gangster, or worse, a black man as a threat? There are hundreds of toxic stereotypes, but here's the good news. Once we identify them, just like we did with ambition, we can't help be aware of them, and we can change them. It's hard work. We need to dig deep and question our own behaviors. Then we need to work together to have tough conversations, not only about gender, but also about race and class. Half of all marginalized populations are women, meaning the issues particular to women of color, LGBTQ women, women in poverty, and others need to be our issues. There is no us and them in the definition of equality. And as Tory said, we need to do this with women. The women need to do this with men. And it's not just the wonderful men in the audience today, all men. Men can and should be our partners in creating new cultural paradigms, not only for their mothers, their sisters, their wives, their daughters, but also for themselves and for their sons. Men, too, are harmed by a patriarchal structure. Today, we hope to spark disruptive thinking. How can we learn to automatically question the assumptions, reactions, and instinctive behaviors in ourselves that harbor unconscious bias? Here's the disclaimer. This is a big topic. There is no way we'll cover it all today or even identify the tips of the many, many icebergs. But it's a start. And the hope is that for all the issues we don't address, we will at least learn to recognize unconscious bias when it surfaces. If you have a brain, you have biases, because that's what brains do. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. And because you are human, you can and should do something about it. That's something I learned firsthand. When I got pregnant 24 years ago, I prayed for a girl. I wanted nothing more than to guide my daughter into the feminine powerhouse that I envisioned for the next generation. I had that playbook. I thought I got my little girl, and I named my child after my incredible great-grandmother as a way to honor all the amazing, strong women in my family. 4 years ago, I had to let go of what I considered my daughter and love the son my child had always been. I had a hard time. I couldn't understand why I felt such a sense of loss when my child hadn't gone anywhere. Friends said, "Of course you feel that way, you lost your daughter." But the truth was, I never really had a daughter. Nico was always a boy, even when he was in girls' clothing. I had to do some deep soul searching that included facing all of my preconceived notions of gender. And in the end, what I discovered had nothing to do with Nico being trans. I was prejudiced. I was disappointed that he was male. I always felt that women had something special that men didn't, which is a viewpoint that would stifle a male child and give a female child too much to live up to. This is not an easy thing to admit, and I remain embarrassed. Worse, far worse, I deeply regret that my son had to see any disappointment in my face in those early months. But like all difficult things, I've grown because of it. And talk about stereotypes. Now my child, who was seen as an aggressively opinionated girl, is my articulate, well-reasoned boy. And he gets interrupted a lot less. Disruptive thinking opened my eyes and allowed me to love my incredible son unconditionally. Is he up there? Yes. This experience has made me a better mom, leader, business person, and feminist. Not that I don't have a long way to go. What I learned is the most important thing we can do to change gender biases and all prejudices is to be mindful of our own thoughts and actions, to disrupt our own thinking. We cannot give ourselves a pass, no matter how enlightened we may think we are. We need to stretch out of our comfort zones, dig deep, and be so bold in our thinking that it scares us. Because that's when change happens. When we deconstruct the norms that we cling to and start from a simple truth. For today, here's my simple truth. We know that women's equality and diversity make the world a better place. So together, let's make the world a better place. Our goal is for you to leave here today inspired and with the tools to counter bias and stereotypes in the hopes that we could create new societal norms that reflect who we really are. Perhaps then, the world I envisioned as a wisecracking 15-year-old feminist will truly be possible. Thank you.